One big problem as we hopefully eventually emerge out of the COVID crisis is even if we have money, we're going to be reluctant to spend it. So how can the government step up spending? The answer perhaps lies in Austria in the 1930s. Can we Worgl our way out of this one? That's today on the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. Welcome along. So, can we Worgl our way out of this? In other words, look, the only reason we're doing this podcast is for that pun, I have to admit, but we have spoken about this before. The town of Worgl in Austria during the Great Depression issued its own currency, basically because money wasn't moving around fast enough. So they issued a currency that lost value over time. I mean, demurrage, isn't it? Demurrage is the term for that. And I guess that, the reasoning behind that is because people can hoard money. And we're actually seeing that right now, aren't we? Where people who've got money are hanging onto it during this crisis, and that's not helping the circulation of money. So this is an issue that needs to be tackled if we're going to find our way out of COVID-19 and get the economy firing up on all cylinders, isn't it?
It is, and this is. That was an amazing experiment, because when you think about, you see how people define money. They say the money has to be a means of account, so where you measure your financial situation versus somebody else, a means of payment, so it's what you use to buy goods and services, and the killer, it's a store of value. Now, this is the problem, because if you actually start to regard money, whatever you're calling money, to regard it more as a store of value, that actually undermines it being used as a means of payment. Because if you think it's going to rise in value, that's a good reason not to spend. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You're actually sacrificing future spending power by spending now. So if you obsess about the store of value side of whatever you use as your currency, you're in trouble because ultimately you are going to be rewarding people for not spending, and then you have lots of money but turning over very, very slowly, so the result can be a stagnant economy. And that wasn't the cause of the Great Depression, but it was one of the consequences of it. You didn't want to spend. And then what the Worgl, the currency was, well, here's a currency, if you don't spend it, it disappears. And rather than getting the runaway inflation effect of the Weimar Republic, the Worgl Republic was one where people, the demurrage system and the need to spend it or you'll lose it meant that people were spending the currency. It turned over at a huge rate, and it drove unemployment from the order of 30% of the population down to zero.
Yeah, and the argument being, I think, that from the economist who pushed ahead with that idea in the first place, which got the attention of the Mayor of Wörgl, was that if you have money, it holds value. If you sell vegetables, they rot if you don't sell them. So really, money should behave like produce does.
And that's people make the same case about energy, that it should be related to energy use and so on. The idea that money is actually something which should decay over time is an important insight that came out of Sylvia Gesell. And Keynes was incredibly impressed by Gesell's argument. But of course, the last thing you can do with an existing currency is bring in the fact that it's going to decay over time, because the people who hold it are going to say, no, don't like that. So it doesn't happen. But when you invent a new currency, that can be one of the rules, that if you don't spend it in a certain time, you've got to affix a stamp to it. And the stamp, each time you do it, falls in value, so you're encouraged to spend rather than hoard.
But inflation does the same thing, doesn't it? If you have inflation, which obviously we don't now, so wouldn't it be easy if we just had some way of getting, if inflation was to pick up, people would start spending because they want to get rid of the money now while it's worth something?
Yeah, and that's why inflation, rather than being the big bogeyman, which is the way the neoclassicals put it across, and also all the hard money types and so on, what that actually does is encourage spending. And it can be, if you have a ludicrous situation of hyperinflation, then that, of course, that's a breakdown in its own right. But a moderate level of inflation, and something at the order of between 2 and 5% per year, is enough to mean that you're more encouraged to spend than you are to hoard. And because you're in a system where your spending is somebody else's income, that actually money comes back to you in the sense that once you've spent it, it goes to somebody else who then buys something off you, and it a very roundabout way, but it actually encourages more economic activity out of the same amount of money. And that was the beauty of the Worgl experiment. It wasn't just a local currency, it's a local currency which depreciated if you didn't use it, and therefore you were encouraged to use it, and that drove up overall economic activity.
Right. So how did that relate to the Austrian shilling? Was it? Were they? I'm trying to think what the currency was.
Yeah, I think it was the shilling.
So how did it?
Yeah.
Well, let's assume I'm right, even though I'm invariably wrong. But what does the? So how did it with the local currency? How did the exchange work? If you went into a shop and you wanted to buy something and it was 10 shillings, how many Worgl dollars would it be?
I don't know the actual conversion rate there, but it was something which could initially be used. One way they encouraged it was that again, this is where it comes very much in line with modern monetary theory thinking. It's something the local council would accept in payment of local council rates, and therefore you had an encouragement to buy it. And like my good friend, the system engineer Trun Andresen, has suggested a similar idea that you, for countries like Ecuador, bring in a parallel currency and give a discount for using it to buy your taxes, or pay your taxes, in which case it could actually end up being worth more than a local currency in that situation, because you're buying a discount on your taxes to get it. And then because economic activity in general increases courtesy of that, then that covers the revenue problems of the council in the first place.
No, but how does paying your tax push up productivity? Because that's a leakage, surely.
No, but what it means is you've got a currency which you're encouraged to hold because you can use it to pay taxes. You don't have enough money you're not getting enough money in. Let's use the mark as our currency here. I'm not sure they're using shillings or marks in Austria at the time, but anyway, say it's the mark. If you don't get enough revenue coming in marks because people are hoarding, courtesy of the Great Depression and the absence of credit-based money and the excessive levels of debt denominated in that currency, you don't have spending in that, but you start accumulating. People are willing to pay you you're willing to accept payment in the Worgl currency, the scrip, because you have commitments in that, and then you can use that to buy somebody else who's also got commitments in the same scrip currency to the local council. And ultimately the rate of turnover of the scrip currency was far higher than the rate of turnover of the mark in the same region, but the sum of the two meant that we had full employment.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, to such an extent, it worked to such an extent, didn't it, that they were having so much money paid back in overdue council tax that they started to wonder, in fact, whether people were counterfeiting the currency because so much of it was coming back, whereas in fact it was just because it was turning over so quickly.
Yeah. And this is the big mistake people make in thinking about money, is that they tend to equate the sum of it they have in their possession with the level of economic activity. But the difference between the two is the sum of the money. It's the turnover rate of the money that matters. So people think you can't pay back any debt money because you've got to pay the interest as well. They're adding the debt in the interest payments in dollars per year to the debt in dollars, which is just a mistake. That thinking gets in the way if we think about a lot of monetary issues. And the beauty of the Worgl experiment was this idea that we want to encourage the turnover of the notes, not the hoarding of those notes. And demurrage meant people with no point in hoarding, you'd lose it.
Right, well, we've seen the velocity of money slow right down, not just during the pandemic, but before that. So does that mean this is the right time for doing something like this? Well, listen to the rest of this discussion by becoming a supporter of Steve Keen on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen, or subscribing at debunkingeconomics.com. You can hear the full half-hour discussion on the Worgl currency and what it means for today. And of course, if you subscribe, you can get full access to all of the podcasts in this series. Thanks for listening so far. We'll catch you again soon. I'm Phil Dobbie. See you next week.